once again. We're thankful you can be here with us. Blessing. This is our theme for the years. What's stopping you? Understanding this, this is going to help us remove the blockage that is stopping us from serving, from fellowshipping, from showing up, from being who Christ has called us to be. So understanding what is stopping you will help you better be who God created you to be. And we need to understand this because the truth is the truth even of what? And a lie is a lie even of what? Yeah, especially in our current time, there's a lot of lies we hold to be the truth, and they're not the truth. So, we've been asking this question, what is the greatest commandment? And so we talked about how, first we answered the question what a commandment was, then we talked about what the greatest commandment was, and he said to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your mind, and all of your might. We covered the love the Lord with all of your heart. We said that we were talking about a desire. We need to become people who have a desire for God. And then we said love the Lord with all of your soul. And we said loving the Lord with all your soul means with all of your being. The Hebrew word was nephesh. It means every inch of every being of you, every breath you take, speak of God. And then we come down to this understanding of loving the Lord with all of your mind. And this one is a little bit heavy, right? Because I don't know about you, because I don't always think about God. Do you always think about God? If you have your paper in your hand right now, and I want you to turn it upside down. I don't want you to look at the first page. Bunch of cheaters. But right now, what is on your mind? Quick, me yelling at you? Okay, I got you. I got you.
How's it going?
She said the low part loud and the loud part low. I got you. What is on your mind right now? Truthfully speaking. There's 5 things that holds us captive every day. And these 5 things, they work in a way where it takes away our time with the Lord. Right? What is on our mind right now? I can tell you right now. What has taken you captive? Or what is on your mind? Based on a common psychological, social, and daily life survey, the top 5 things consistently occupying people's minds are a mixture of survival, need, anxiety-driven thoughts, and social connection. Here are the top 5. Money and finances. Everybody says, We talk about financial security. This often cited as the #1 worry. It includes anxieties about debt, paying bills, cost of living, and saving for the future. Nobody's worried about that, right? Especially in this economy. We good? Health and wellness. Both personal health, weight loss, fitness, illness, and the health of loved ones are constantly monitored, often leading to health anxiety. Nothing feels more assuring than going to a doctor and the doctor looking at you and saying, well, we don't know what's happening. Oh, I feel assured, don't you? Then there's relationship, family, partners, friends, thoughts on social connections, whether it is finding a partner, maintaining a relationship, or worrying about the safety and happiness of children and family members. That takes up some time. And then there's work and career pressure. Daily thoughts frequent and revolve around job security, meeting deadlines, dealing with colleagues, or searching for a new job. And then there's the daily logistic of the to-do list. Mental space is constantly taken up by mundane tasks like what's for dinner, chores, errands, and managing time. Other common underlying thoughts include, what are other people thinking about me? Valuing others people's opinions or worrying about other people's judgment. Then there's the past. Do we have any control over the past? No. But it doesn't stop us from worrying about it, does it? Then there is the future. Again, do you have control over the future? Yeah, but it doesn't stop us from worrying about it, does it? Wishing we made past action or decision better choices, or replaying conversation we have, hoping we can get it back, or worrying about our potential or negative events that we have no control over. It is estimated that up to 95% of our thoughts are repetitive, with a high percentage being negative or anxious in nature. Now, with those 5 things, plus the other ones we talked about, clouding your mind, how is it possible for you to love the Lord with all of your mind? See, for this particular reason, it can become impossible for us to love the Lord with all of our mind, because all of our mind is being held captive by many different distractions. Sometimes we allow these distractions to be crippling, to have a crippling control over our lives, and can lead to a mental, physical, and spiritual damage. So what can we do about it? First, let's learn what it means to love the Lord with all of your mind. Then let's learn from our example in the Bible, from Joshua chapter 24, verse 14 to 16. And then we can apply what we have learned from him in the update from Paul to the Romans in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. What does it mean to love the Lord with all your mind? Loving the Lord with all your mind means intentionally. This will be our key word. Intentionally dedicating your intellect, your thoughts, and your reasoning. Take a minute. From Sunday to Sunday, how many of us intentionally dedicate our intellect, our thoughts, and our reasoning to God? In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14 to 16, Paul tells Timothy to remind them of these things and solemnly charge them in the presence of God not to wrangle about words, which is useless and leads to the ruin of the hearer. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God as a workman who does not need to be ashamed, accurately handling the word of what? Truth. Why is this important? So that we can know, honor, and obey God. Here's the most important part. We can do it the way he instructed us to do it when we intentionally take the time to study his word. Loving the Lord with all my mind means that we will filter our life's decision through a biblical truth, the Bible, and not through what feels right or what the world calls right. Yeah, that is the gut punch. Because sometimes when things go bad, we run to the world for quick solutions and a quick fix. And that is not the answer. We show that we love the Lord with all our mind by filtering our life's decision through his word and not through what seems right. Proverbs 14:12 and Proverbs 16:25. You know what's so amazing when something so important that doesn't say it once, but it repeats it twice, right? He said it in chapter 14. He said, hey, they're not paying attention. I'm going to say it again in chapter 16. He said, there's a way which seems what? Right to who? Or man. But the end is the way of what? That's what happens when we don't filter it through God. It is a warning against relying on personal, subjective, or selfish perspective rather than divine wisdom. Something can appear beneficial or correct in the short term, but ultimately leads to destruction. So loving the Lord with all our mind creates an intentional need to trust in God's guidance rather than just human intellect, especially regarding decisions that may seem right but contradicts what God's will is. So let's talk about the example in Joshua. In Joshua chapter 24, verse 14 to 16, but first we need a little background work, right? So we'll go up in verse 1 through 13, and so we'll have a history of what God has done for them. You see, loving the Lord with all of your mind, meaning that I will intentionally dedicate time to get to know who God is, what he has done for me, so that I'm able to understand who God is, right? And so when we get here to Joshua chapter 24, Joshua reminds them in verse 1 through 13 what God has done for them. Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and their judges and their officers, and they presented themselves before God. Joshua said to the people, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, from ancient times your fathers lived beyond the river, namely Terah, the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, and they served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his descendant and gave him Isaac. To Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau, and to Esau I gave Mount Seir to possess it. But Jacob and his sons went down to Egypt. Then I sent Moses and Aaron and plagued Egypt by what I did in its midst. And afterward I brought you out. I brought your father out of Egypt, and you came to the sea. And Egypt pursued your father with chariots and a horseman to the Red Sea. But when they cried out to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and brought the sea upon them and covered them. And your own eyes saw what I did in Egypt, and you lived in the wilderness for a long time. Then I brought you into the land of the Amorites, who lived beyond the Jordan, and they fought with you, and I gave them into your hand, and you took possession of their land, and I destroyed them before you. Then Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, arose and fought against Israel, and he sent and summoned Balaam and the son of Beor to curse you. But I was not willing to listen to Balaam, and so I had to bless you, and I deliver you from his hand. You crossed the Jordan and came to Jericho, and the citizens of Jericho fought against you, and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Geshurites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Yes. Thus I gave them into your hand. Then I sent the hornets before you, and it drove out the two kings of the Amorites from before you, but not by your swords or your bow. I gave you a land on which you had not labored, and city which you had not built, and you lived in them. You are eating of vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant. Do they know this God now? Because Joshua is telling them, this is the God I am talking about. The one who took you out of everything. The one who gave you land you didn't labor for. The one who fed you of food you didn't plant. The one who gave you everything. The God who took you out of Egypt. The God who took you out of there. The God who protected you from your enemies. The God who protects you from yourself. The God who is the God of all gods. And then he says, now concerning loving the Lord with all of your mind, intentionally choosing God, Joshua gives them a choice. In verse 14 and 15 he says, now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. If it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourself today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He gave them a choice, right? He listed everything God had done for them, what God is currently doing for them, right? And what God will do for them. And then he gave them a choice. If it is disagreeable for you, he says, if it is disagreeable for you. What should you do? Pick for yourself. The question becomes, how do we fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth. How do we intentionally choose to love him with all of our mind? That is a two-part answer, right? Because when you're reading this, it says, now therefore fear the Lord. Why would Joshua have to tell people who know God to fear God? Simple answer. They don't know God. They're not committed to God. Who are they committed to? Self. That's why he has to remind them of who God is, of what God is doing, or what God is going to do. We don't have those problems today, right? We don't take things into our own hands, right? I mean, we go to the doctor tells us you got 6 months to live. We're like, oh yeah, I believe you. And then 6 months later, you go back to the same doctor to look him in the face. You still alive? Think of the amount of time we panic on these issues of health. Who has control of your health? God. Now, I'm not saying to be reckless. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying understanding that your life belongs to who? God. Right? The doctor was talking about this idea of stewardship. That's what it is. We don't have ownership over anything. We're made steward of everything. So we need to understand that. But if God is not on our mind, then everything else is. Right? It's why we worry about everything. Now, here's the question. Worrying about something always makes it better, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. Why do you do it? This is a funny thing. Somebody said once, you can either worry or you can pray. You can't do both. Because they contradict each other. You know what worrying is? Worrying is sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do. You're not going to go anywhere, but it gives you something to do. Right? That's the idea. But here, our two-part answer for this question of how do we fear the Lord and serve him sincerely. How do I show that I love the Lord with all of my mind? It starts with us intentionally choosing to get to know him by not being conformed to this world. There's something pretty cool you have to do when you get there to Romans chapter 12. We're doing Romans 12, 1 and 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to take verse 2 first and then end in verse 1, right? Because this idea of loving the Lord with all of my mind has to do with this idea that I cannot conform to this world. But I need to be transformed by the what?
Renewing of my mind.
Renewing of your what? Mind. You know the thing the world does? The world says this. This is the dumbest thing you're going to hear today. Trust me. The world says if you want to be better, you need to turn off your mind. That eliminates thinking, right? Become one with the universe. I don't want to be one with the universe. I don't even know the universe. Turn off your mind and become one with you. I don't want to be one with me. I'm a sinful human being. But the world tells you to turn off your mind. Here, in the Bible, in God's instruction for us, it says to renew your mind so that you prove what the will of God is. That which is good and acceptable and perfect. Who don't want that kind of knowledge? You don't want what's good? You don't want what is acceptable? You don't want what is perfect? What do you want? You want the mess? What do you want? He says, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What is going to transform my mind? God's will, his will, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. When you go to your doctor and they tell you, well, we ran a bushel of tests. We ran all the tests. We just can't figure it out. Keep coming back, we'll run more tests. And that's when you start to panic. Because the one who was put there by the Creator, you forgot about. You allowed the Creator to make you panic. Right? You allowed your mind not to be renewed on God. Right? Remember, renewing my mind, loving God with other mind is me what? Intentionally taking time to dedicate to know who God is. So how do I show that I love the Lord with all my mind? Well, back to verse 1. If I've already renewed my mind on the things of God, and I renew my mind on his will, and I understand his will, that which is good, acceptable, and perfect, then the question is, how do I put that into action? Simple. Therefore, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living and holy what? Acceptable to who? Which is your service of worship. It can't be that easy. It can't be that simple. So all I got to do is love the Lord with all of my mind by reflecting on his instruction for my life, by reading my Bible daily, and by studying it daily, right? And then what I have studied, I apply it. How do I do that? By presenting your bodies a living and holy sacrifice that's acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. Josh was telling us this morning, this week, a man walked in here. His name was David. And David looked distraught. So I was asking, David, what's wrong? What's going on? He didn't want to talk. He put his head up, he says, I was driving by and I saw the sign that says you guys were giving away food. What do you need? I said, we need some stuff, David. Look at the board. What do we need? We get some peanut butter, some soup, some stuff like that. Whatever you can bring, David would take. David said, okay, I'll be back Saturday. Saturday, David came and he brought food. Now, we can sit here and say, law was on David's mind, or David was distraught, David was going through a lot of things. We don't know. What we do know is David took time out of his busy schedule to think of others as more important than himself. Yes. Right? In Philippians 2:5, it says to have this attitude. Some versions say to have this mindset, which is also in Christ Jesus. Everything Christ did was for the Father. Right? Everything he did. There was not a doubt that said, well, he doesn't know God. His mind was the mind of God. This is what we're asking for. This is what God is asking for. This is why he is a jealous God. Imagine you're sitting there and Joshua is talking to you and he's saying all these things that God has done for you in the life. And then he gives you the choice. And I really do love their response, but Joshua even responds even more, right? Because in verse 16, they say, oh, who are we not to serve God? And Joshua said, you're not going to do it. This is where you're reading it like, why is he being mean? Joshua has lived with these people. Joshua has seen these people drive Moses crazy. And so Joshua says, if it disagrees with you, you make the choice. You choose for yourself. But you know what you're not going to do? You're not going to drive me nuts like you did Moses. For as for me and my family, we're going to serve the Lord. And that phrase bugs me a lot because a lot of time people will use that phrase to say they're serving God. And I always tell them, don't say that in front of me because I'm going to ask you how you're doing it. And that's where the hiccup comes in. Yeah. Well, as for me and my family, we're going to serve the Lord. How are you doing it? We go to church on Sunday. You're obligated to do that. So, how? What else? Well, I give. You're okay. What else? See, that's a mind that's not on God. That's a mind that's on the checklist. And sometimes we go through the motions of the checklist, where we worship God, but our heart is not in it. We shake hands, we hug each other, but we don't call and check up on each other during the week until we see them again Sunday. That's what makes the conversation uncomfortable. How you doing? All right? Doing good? Yeah, all right. All right, see you later. If our mind is on God, then we're dedicating time to not just read, but to study. Because we want to get to know who God is. We want to have that natural fear. It says fear is the beginning of knowledge of God. We want the knowledge of God. But the thing about it is we got to learn to be intentional about this knowledge of God. We got to cultivate it for ourselves. You can't depend on what the minister said. You can't depend on what the guy on TV says. You can't depend on what the old guy said. You have to cultivate it for yourself. This is how we grow. And in cultivating for ourselves, we start to understand and start to block the things that is stopping us from being who God has called us to be. This is why it's important that we learn to love Him with all of our desire, which is our heart, with all of our being, which is our soul, with all of our mind, which is intentionally studying to know who God is. Next, we're going to try to love Him with all of our might. See how that works. Right? If you're here this morning, this afternoon, and you are ready to love the Lord with all of your desire, all of your being, and all of your mind, we'll ask you to come down and be added to the body. Baptism is where we start our journey with God. It is full immersion under water. There is no half-half. There's no sprinkling. There's no prayer. It is full immersion under water where you are brought up brand new in Christ Jesus, where the old you died. And then you're given a free gift of the Holy Spirit who now dwells in you. It's amazing that I think sometimes we forget that God has given us His Spirit so He can dwell with us. He's a jealous God. He doesn't want to share you with anybody else. That's why He makes these marks. And also if you're struggling, going through hard times in need of anything, I call you to come up as we stand to sing our song.